Hi everyone. This video is going to be mostly me just talking about some controversial stuff around the ethics of AI art, specifically from the perspective of artists whose work has been used to train the AIs. I have been thinking about this nonstop for a couple of months now, and I have a lot to say. I have my own opinions that I really just need to spew out into this video, so enjoy some relaxing Subnautica visuals while I do that. Let me tell you, this is a rat's nest of ethical and legal and philosophical issues, and there are lots of very strong opposing opinions out there right now. So I'm looking forward to all the nice comments on this video. I am ignoring the question of whether AI art is art. It's an interesting question that I'll probably talk about later, but for now I simply use the term art to mean pretty pictures. This was brought to my attention mostly by this video, which I encourage you to watch. It's by an artist who really doesn't like what AI art companies have done, and I have to say, I agree with most everything he says, especially the criticisms of data collection. There is a lot of protest from artists against AI art right now, and I think it's very much deserved given all the pain the tech world has put the art world through in the last few years. I'm not an AI expert, but I am a hobbyist and a programmer who loves playing with AI, and I'm hoping to reach a more techie audience that maybe isn't as aware of the issues surrounding the technology. I should clarify that I'm coming at this as a person who loves both human and AI art. I've always enjoyed drawing, though I'm not very good at it, and it's not my career, and I've had a ton of fun playing with these models. If you're anything like me and have an overactive imagination and a lack of artistic skills, AI art is a godsend. I basically only benefit from the existence of AI art, but none of this justifies the way it's made. The problem, more or less, is this. AI art companies like Midjourney, Stability AI, and OpenAI train their art models on massive datasets of images collected from the internet through a process called scraping. These datasets include huge amounts of art, copyrighted or otherwise, scraped from websites like DeviantArt and ArtStation, and are taken without asking the artist's permission or providing any compensation. Their art is used to train an AI model as a monetized product that is sold as, essentially, a professional artist that can mass produce any subject or style. This directly threatens the jobs and livelihoods of the artists who unknowingly created the training data in the first place. First the company takes their art, then they take their job. Hopefully you can see the issue here, but just to pull at your empathy, imagine you were an illustrator, say, and you lose your job to an AI that was trained on your art. Something should seem unfair about that. This is an especially cruel thing to do to artists, the people whose hard work and creativity and skill are the key ingredients to making the AI as good as it is in the first place. As a tech bro myself, I find this argument very compelling, and I'm convinced that these companies are morally in the wrong. I admit, despite knowing how this tech works, I did not think about these problems until they were brought to my attention by artists, so I'm thankful for that, and again, I encourage you to hear their concerns directly. I'll talk more about this later, but moving forward, I am going to stop paying for AI art, including Midjourney. I feel that I especially need to do this since I monetize my use of AI art in these videos, so instead I will use free models like Stable Diffusion and the DALL-E free tier, which would allow me to keep exploring these interesting technologies in an educational way without directly supporting the companies themselves. Now, I'm not shutting down my Discord's Midjourney image generators or pick breeders. You can still use the bot with a paid subscription if you want. I leave it up to you. There are a few counter-arguments that are often presented in defense of AI art, which I will address, and for the record, I don't agree with every criticism of AI art and data collection in general. Again, I really like the generated art itself, and I think there are complicated nuances and gray areas around data ownership. Ethically, I care mostly about the consequences of actions, whether or not they're harmful, and I'm going to try to be as practical as I can. Okay, first let's talk about automation. So part of the issue stems from the fact that these models will automate away the jobs of artists. If you're not convinced of this, I don't think you're really aware of just how good these models are right now, or how much they will improve in the future. To be fair, they're far from perfect, and in their current state, I don't think they can replace a single artist in all of their capacities. The images can be very imperfect and often need to be touched up or just made from scratch, and the model definitely takes some skill to work with to produce good images. But it is also very reasonable to me that a single artist armed with a current generation AI art generator is probably worth 2 or 3 human artists, just in terms of the sheer number of images that can be produced. Companies will go with the cheaper option, opting to use AI art over human art. Some jobs will be lost. The argument often gets caught up by the question of whether the AI is a tool or a replacement. It's both. A shovel is a tool that replaces the work of 10 men digging by hand. Any tool worth its salt replaces a certain amount of human labor. It makes jobs easier, faster, more efficient, and require less skill. That's the point of a tool. This particular tool can be more of a replacement for some and more of just a tool for others. For me, it's just a tool, and a very useful one. For an illustrator, concept artist, stock photographer, maybe not. Automation by itself is a complicated issue that perhaps requires some more discussion, but in general, I don't think a technology automating away jobs is unethical. That is, to some extent, the natural and desirable result of innovation, which should be encouraged. However, in this particular case, the jobs are being taken away from the people that created the data in the first place and who did not consent to their work being used in this way. It is exploitative and has negative consequences. Imagine tomorrow it turns out some company has been collecting data from you performing your day job for years and is now rolling out a robot trained on your data to replace you for cheap. There is no recourse. This is the actual world artists live in. Is that the world you want to live in? Ultimately, though automation is part of the issue, most of the ethical concern for me lies with data ownership and the exploitation of other people's work. If the data were collected with consent, automation would still occur, but for me, the ethical problem would basically evaporate. So, data collection. A way these companies often collect their data is through a middleman company like Lion, which scrapes the internet and produces huge public or private datasets of billions of images. On top of art, these datasets include copyrighted works, leaked private photos, pictures of private homes, and, though they try to filter it, large amounts of pornography. You can search their datasets at haveibeentrained.com to see if you or your work are in the dataset. It is all scraped without permission. How is this legal? Well, Lion is a non-profit company which enjoys protections for its actions because its datasets are being collected for academic, non-commercial purposes. These datasets are then supplied to companies like Stability AI, who immediately commercialize them. The relationship between Lion and Stability is unclear to me. Lion seems to be a sub-community within Stability, and Stability AI has directly funded the creation of these datasets. So, in practice, they get to scrape images as a non-profit company that then gets to generate profit. It's a loophole they're exploiting, technically legal but very scummy. This is often called data laundering, and it's a way of slurping up other people's data from under their nose. This is part of a wider criticism of deep learning, which is that it is an extremely data-hungry process. Midjourney is a total mystery. Their models and dataset are completely closed source, though I believe they've also used Lion's public datasets. It's not clear exactly what they're doing, but Midjourney can and has reproduced copyrighted works, so they must be doing something similar. OpenAI describes itself as a capped profit company as opposed to for-profit, which I guess lets them do the same thing, though I think they made up the term capped profit, so I'm not sure how that gives them any legal protection. I'm not a lawyer. By the way, they have capped their profits at 100 times their investments, so if they receive $1 billion in funding, they will graciously only accept $100 billion in profits before that money starts going to their nonprofit fund, I guess. This is ludicrous and dishonest, and it shouldn't be done. You're either for-profit or you're not, and OpenAI is trying to be both. Now, I'm not against for-profit companies, but I am against pretending to be non-profit so you can legally collect copyrighted data and then monetize it for profit. Now, I have mixed feelings about OpenAI, which does provide some morally unproblematic and extremely valuable AI tools that they could have monetized. They may be doing this selfishly to prove that they're not fully for profit, but regardless of intent, it is a nice thing to do, and I'm grateful for the people involved. I even give Stability AI points for open sourcing Stable Diffusion, which I know that's a controversial opinion, but if you're going to use an artist's work as if it's free for anyone to use for any purpose, it seems to me the least you can do is make the end product also free for anyone to use for any purpose. Ultimately, though, one good deed does not pay for a bad one. None of this excuses the exploitation of artists. I want to make clear that I have no ill will towards anyone who works or has worked for these companies. I've known a few and I know them to be creative and intelligent and ethically responsible. Even people directly involved in the data collection process, I can easily see as having been motivated by nothing more than a desire to make cool stuff. I empathize enormously with this sentiment. I want to make cool stuff too, but not by exploiting people. There must be limits. Okay, the terms art theft and stealing art are thrown around a lot. For what it's worth, I think stealing is too strong a word to describe what these companies are doing. I don't care too much about the semantics of it. You can call it art theft if you want. But to me, real art theft is taking art and selling or reposting it as your own, not using it in a derivative work without credit. The whole issue boils down to the same problem artists have had since the beginning of the internet, which is that there is no such thing as ownership in the digital world. Information can be easily and infinitely copy-pasted, and the original creator has no guarantee that they'll be compensated or credited. Ownership is hard, and digital ownership is really hard. NFTs promised to solve this problem. They did not, and they just inspired a new wave of art theft. NFTs are really stupid.
Is this an NFT?
Giga Chad, yeah.
Ah, that's hilarious. With a little that Dogecoin.
Yeah, the Dogecoin dog.
Wow.
In one sense, what these AI art companies are doing is not as egregiously wrong as straight up stealing someone else's work and passing it off as your own, but in another sense, it is more subtly exploitative. They're not stealing the artist's work as much as they're stealing their skill, their creativity, and selling it for cheap. What's worse is that these models are trained with individual artists' names, meaning their specific style can be replicated quite easily, and people are incentivized to use the artist's name in the prompt to get the best images. Many artists have complained about this, like Greg Rutkowski, whose name is used in prompts all the time, and it's very strange that his name and likeness can be used without his consent in a monetized product. I have never really used artists' names, mostly because prompt crafting is annoying and frustrating, but I will continue not to, especially with anything that's monetized or posted online. A way to collect data ethically is to simply get permission to use an artist's work in an AI model, but the way you go about doing this has its own complications. You can make it an opt-out system where by default an artist's work is used unless they actively request that it not be used, or you can make an opt-in system where the art can only be used if the artist actively allows it. DeviantArt has tried to make an opt-in system where they'll train an AI on only specifically allowed deviations, but their starting model is Stable Diffusion, which is already trained on all of DeviantArt's work with no respect for their opting system. There is no opt, only in. The company that made Have I Been Trained, Spawning AI, has apparently partnered with Stability AI to make an opt-out system for Stable Diffusion 3. You find your work on their website and submit a request to remove it from the next model's training dataset. You must do this in the next few weeks before it's too late and they start training again. I have many doubts and questions about this, like how do they verify an artist's identity? How will they ensure Stability will actually respect these requests? And unless they're going to remove the previous datasets, your work will still be easily available and can be brought in from those old datasets to train a model. And this won't affect Stable Diffusion 1 or 2. Once a model is trained, there is no way to make it forget its original training data, short of training from scratch. This is, of course, the main issue with open sourcing a model. If there are problems with how it's made, it will never go away. I do think an actually functioning opt-out system would be better than nothing, but ultimately, to earn my dollar, an AI art company would need to collect its data from the public domain or with explicit permission from artists through an opt-in system. Maybe you could hire a large team of artists and photographers and animators to build an in-house, curated, high-quality dataset. This would take a while, and given the absurd data requirements, I do see this as a huge technical challenge, but for a company like OpenAI, funded in the billions and supplied with some of the most innovative and intelligent people on the face of the planet, come on, there has got to be a way to do this ethically. Okay, now to address the most common defense of AI art. Here it goes. What these models do is essentially the same thing as inspiration. The model is inspired from its training data in more or less the same way that a human artist is inspired by the artwork they like and incorporate in their own work. An artist who copies another artist's style is not doing anything wrong. It might be a bit derivative, but not morally an issue, and the same goes for the AI model and the company making it. Therefore, all data, copyrighted or otherwise, is fair game. It's all just inspiration. I actually kind of agree with the analogy. A human taking inspiration from art is loosely similar in a poetic way to how models learn from their training data. A better word is imitate, which is very literally true to what both humans and AIs can do. Imitating another artist, so long as you don't lie about being that artist, is not a problem. There is a sense of truth here, but I'd argue that ultimately the two are just not the same in terms of scale and, most importantly, consequences. Human inspiration does not include farming up billions of images from the internet from every single artist ever known, and the end product for a human imitator would be a few derivative works, not a machine that can mass produce any artwork in any style, something that threatens the livelihood of all artists. A benign practice, scaled up to an industrial level, can become much more exploitative and morally wrong. That being said, there is an enormous gray area to ownership over digital assets, and this is where I'm going to be a bit more apologetic. There are cases where a person or company can use someone else's work without their permission in a derivative work and make money from it. That may sound sketchy until you realize that this is the concept of fair use. I'm going to use the legal terminology here, but I'm talking mostly about ethics. Morally, when is it fair to use someone else's work without permission to make money? Here on YouTube, it's done all the time. People take clips from movies and games and artworks without asking the original creators and make monetized videos from them. This is not inspiration, it's copy-pasting. Typically, the derivative work needs to offer criticism or commentary or otherwise be transformative, which I would say that AI art is very transformative. Yes, it can reproduce individual works almost exactly, but that is not what people want or use it for. The original work already exists. The generated images that people actually care about are an entirely new collage of styles, subjects, and ideas from potentially thousands of source training images. Is that not transformative? That is, I think, a pretty fair argument. I am pretty impressed by these models, and I really do think they are excellent at intelligently combining old ideas into new transformative pieces. This is why I would not call it art theft. I just don't think being transformative is enough to brush away every ethical concern. Again, the scale and consequences are wildly different. The practice of limitless data collection from everyone with no reservations or way to claim ownership is a different thing than a YouTuber dubbing over Star Wars.
I've been wondering, what are midichlorians?
It's heroin.
And there are limits to fair use. Even on YouTube, some kinds of images, videos, and especially music are not usable, transformative or not. In fact, being transformative by itself is usually not enough to protect a derivative work. Why are AI art companies exempt from this and YouTubers are not? Fair use is not infinite, and that is for a reason, to protect artists' ownership. I simply believe that AI models should not be entirely exempt from any restrictions to their data harvesting practices. As it stands right now, any image that can be scraped from the internet is fair game, and there has to be something wrong with that. Okay, so just to complicate things further, let me present a few cases of data collection for machine learning projects that I think have varying levels of ethical concerns. As an obviously wrong example, what if a company took every audio recording from an actor without their permission and trained an AI to replicate their voice, and then they sold that AI to do voiceover work instead of the original actor? I think most of us can agree that's clearly wrong. What about a company scraping public tweets, Reddit threads, and internet forums and using them to train a monetized chatbot? That, to me, seems fair. Here I'm thinking about a few things. How public and protected is the data? What kind of licensing is it under? How hard was the data to make? And what will it be used for? In this case, the data is very public and has no licensing protections. It doesn't really require much skill to create, and the end product doesn't harm the people that provided the data, or anyone for that matter. I'd argue it's justified. What about an AI that makes YouTube thumbnails trained from real YouTube thumbnails that were taken without permission? I did this, and I made a video about it. Hardly anyone saw it, and the model sucked, but I made a video about it, and I made a few bucks. In fact, I have been thinking about training Stable Diffusion on more YouTube thumbnails in a follow-up video. How do we feel about that? I'm going to wait for some feedback, but I'd say it's justified. Thumbnails are also very public. They're not super hard to make, and the end product wouldn't really replace anyone's job. Usually making a thumbnail is part of your job, not your whole job. After all, I also use the thumbnails themselves in the monetized video, and that's obviously fair use. Is using them in the model not also fair use? Let me know what you think about this. Now, I can keep complicating things for days and talk about using books and code and music and datasets. I am not sure where to draw the line here, but wherever the line is, I'd say AI art companies have crossed it. They take any and all art under any kind of licensing, much of it very hard to produce from skilled artists, and it directly threatens their livelihoods. I suspect people are going to draw the line all over the place, so there are going to be lots of disagreements here, and I myself do waffle back and forth at times. The argument from fair use makes things especially complicated, but at the end of the day, I cannot help but empathize with the little artist that has been exploited. Now, I make no recommendations on where legally the line needs to be drawn, and I don't envy whoever needs to make that decision. Remember that systems like copyright that are meant to protect artists' ownership can be abused by artists or usually production companies to claim ownership of someone else's work that uses a 2-second clip of a song. The stronger you make the protections on an artist's work, the more you stifle the creativity and innovation of those who want to make derivative work. There is a balance to be struck here, and there are lots of ways of doing this wrong. I certainly wouldn't want to live in a world where an artist can copyright their style. So what can be done? Well, you can do whatever you want, but if you agree with me and you want to do something, my recommendation is to simply vote with your wallet. Don't pay for AI art. Don't pay for Midjourney, don't pay for Dream Studio, don't pay for DALL-E. There are plenty of free options. Right now, Playground AI is probably the best. It's a third-party website that runs Stable Diffusion for you and gives you 1,000 images a day with full licensing rights. It's a very good deal, and I'm not sure how long it can last. DALL-E also gives you 15 image credits a month for free, so you can use that too. This will hopefully provide some small incentive for these or other companies to push for ethically sourced AI art, which I would happily pay for. I am not opposed to paying for monetized products. I believe that developers should be compensated for their work, but so should artists, and that's the rub. Now this opens the question, can I monetize an open source model like Stable Diffusion by making YouTube videos about it? I say I'm justified. I'm not supporting Stability AI or Midjourney or the actual companies that took the data. I'm trying to be open and clear about the ethical issues behind them, and I'm actually using them in an educational way in free YouTube videos that don't replace a human artist. I think that's good enough, but as a wise man once said,
everyone draws the moral line of what's acceptable just slightly below what they're actually doing.
I'm also going to start paying for and incorporating human art into my work, partially to offset my use of AI art, but also because human art is awesome. Look at this picture of an orangutan I commissioned from an artist on Fiverr. It is a very good orangutan, and we're just going to sit here and appreciate it for a bit. Feel free to pause the video for 2 or 3 days if you really need more time to revel in this orangutan's magnificence. If you're going to use and especially monetize AI art, try to be respectful of living artists. I would avoid using their names and replicating their individual styles, and in general, be honest about using AI. You didn't make the art, the AI did, and by extension, the army of artists and photographers that provided the training data without consent. Now, maybe you think there is no moral way to interact with these models at all. I disagree with that. Despite all the issues, I would still encourage people to play with the AI, especially artists. Ethically made or not, the technology is beautiful. There are genuinely new, alien worlds in these models, and I believe they can be explored without exploiting. To end on a hopeful note, it may turn out that fears of automation are overstated. This may seem unlikely, but it's actually quite common for AI tech to be way overhyped and for it to not have as big or damaging of an impact as expected. Only time will tell. I do also see a fairly common opinion that, ethically sourced or not, AI art robs humanity of its creative spirit and undermines the authenticity of artistic expression. This is an opinion I mostly disagree with. I'll talk about it more in a future video, but as a hopeful example, consider chess. Computers have been beating humans at chess for over 2 decades, and yet we still care a great deal about human skill in the game. People still love and learn chess despite the fact that someone and some algorithms will always be better than them. And art is way more subjective than chess. No artist or art is truly better than any other. Well, there is one bad artist.
Giga Chad, yeah.
Humans will always value human expression, and I think there will always be a market for human art, though it may be diminished. I reject the idea that art is dead. That is nonsense, and the art community's defiance proves it. I believe and hope that things can improve, though there is likely a rocky road ahead, but we can always look to human art for inspiration. All right, that's it. I'm done talking about this. Keep it civil. Happy holidays. See you later.
I drink your milkshake. I drink it up!